With the OnePlus 12R, the manufacturer has in some ways gone back to its roots. It's offering up a phone that only costs about $499 in the US or £649 in the UK, but still giving top tier levels of performance, fast charging and a brilliant display. Which leaves me thinking, why spend more? Even comparing it to its more expensive sibling, it looks like a great value for money device. And while there are benefits to spending more, I don't think you absolutely need to. I'm Cam Bunton, and in this comparison, I'll tell you why. I'll keep talk about the design brief because, well, it's obvious, isn't it? They're almost identical. There are some subtle differences here and there between the expensive model and the not so expensive model, but nothing that makes a significant impact on how it feels to hold or to use them. The 12R is a little bit lighter and a little thinner than its premium counterpart, but they're both over 200 grams and both virtually 9mm thick, and both feature a very similar shaping and design. That extra thickness on the 12 is partly down to the fact that it has a wireless charging coil inside, but that's it. Both even have similar levels of dust and water resistance. Both should survive splashes and rain just about okay without too much trouble, even if the 12 is rated slightly higher. You get the alert slider on the cheaper one just like you do on the expensive one, but oddly enough, when it comes to feel and touch, it's the haptic engine inside that makes the biggest difference to my experience of using the 12R over the 12. The vibration inside that cheaper one isn't quite as precise or crisp feeling when you're tapping the display or interacting with the phone, but that is a very minor nitpicky thing. Granted, it's something I really appreciate in the 12 because I care about this stuff, but most people and most buyers almost certainly don't even consider it. Now, spec-wise, there's one obvious difference between this cheaper model and its more expensive sibling, at least talking about displays, and that's the resolution. But oddly enough, it's not the thing I found made the biggest difference when using the two phones to consume shows and movies. Because while the 12 has QHD resolution and the 12R doesn't, the end result actually is that both screens are crisp, sharp and detailed. The 12R is somewhere between Full HD and QHD. It's the colour processing actually that impacts the viewing experience more. With both switched to their natural modes, the 12R has a more yellowish tint to it, and that only gets more exaggerated if you enable the nature tone display. In this setting, the 12 is cleaner and a little more accurate to my eyes. There's not much in this, and while immersed in your favourite shows or games, it's not going to be something that negatively impacts your experience all that much. But what's interesting is if you go digging into the colour settings, you don't get the same options on the two phones, but you can adjust the coolness or warmth on either. Now I wanted to talk about performance for a bit, especially in regards to the OnePlus 12R, and that's for one reason. It's got the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 platform inside, which until a couple of months ago was the absolute top chipset you could get in a phone. And that's important context, because it hasn't just suddenly become bad just because there's a new version out now. It's one of the most powerful and efficient flagship processors ever made, and while the Gen 3 does still outperform it in benchmarks and battery efficiency, you're still getting an incredibly good processor inside the 12R. In fact, in almost every instance of loading games, apps, performing tasks, using the camera, there's little chance you'd use the 12R and think you're shortchanged in terms of speed or responsiveness. And a big part of that is down to how good this platform is, but also in combination with OnePlus's and Oppo's software, which is designed to feel fast and smooth, combined with various firmware optimizations for managing RAM, battery consumption and speed. That, plus the fact it has a 120Hz screen, means that at last, when it comes to pure speed, the 12R feels like a proper flagship phone. Sure, you could benchmark test the 12R and the 12 would give you better scores, but benchmark tests aren't the same as actually using a device, and when it comes to using them, the 12R gives you this feeling of having a really powerful phone in your palm. It's a bit of a monster. Where you might find a little difference is in the read and write speeds, so downloading and installing apps will be a little bit faster on the 12 since it features the faster UFS 4.0 storage versus the 3.1 on the 12R. It's a similar story in battery performance, where the slightly larger 5,500 mAh versus the 12's 5,400 can last a long time on a full charge. I will say this though, the OnePlus 12 has one of the best performing batteries I've used in a modern Android phone, at least in the era of 5G phones, lasting virtually 2 days on a full charge. The 12R wasn't quite as good, but there's not a lot in it with my mixed usage. This is usually made up of about 3 hours of gaming, social media and web browsing, with Instagram and Threads seeming to suck more battery than a lot of other apps. Still, a full day is absolutely no problem for either of them, and both have the same charging speeds, refilling at 100 watts with the included wired charger in the box. They can do 0 to 100 in just over 25 minutes. The OnePlus 12 does have wireless charging too, so there is an added convenience there. I think it's in the camera department you'll see the biggest differences between the top tier model and the R variant. And it's obvious right from looking at the spec sheet why that experience is so different. Both have good primary cameras, and even if you go with a cheaper one, while it might not be quite as good in low light as the 12R's main sensor can still get you good results in most conditions. It's when you want to switch between focal lengths that it's going to show its weaknesses. It's got an ultra-wide camera, just like the 12, but this ultra-wide has a much lower resolution sensor that's much more like what you'd find in a mid-range phone. The OnePlus 12 also has that 3x periscope style optical zoom lens, giving you the ability to get closer to objects that are further away. That's not to say you can't zoom on the 12R, you can. Because of its main 50 megapixel sensor, it uses sensor crop or digital zoom and allows you to quickly switch between 2 and 5x zoom in the basic camera interface. But compare those 2x zoom and 5x zoom images to the OnePlus 12's 3 and 6x, and you'll notice they don't have the same level of sharpness or clarity. They'll do in a pinch, but they're not great. In general, I also found that the OnePlus 12R colours weren't as natural as those on the 12. Almost like it was a little washed out and overexposed at times, feeling a bit harsh and lacking in depth. Oftentimes the main camera would also add a yellow or orange warm tint to images and slightly oversaturate colours so that bricks on this church, for example, look almost red, where in reality they're closer to beige or sand coloured. Greens also look a little artificial when looking at any grass in the backgrounds of landscapes. The experience of actually using the 12R camera is also a little different too, because unlike the 12, there's no Hasselblad color processing or branding anywhere. So the app doesn't feature any of those added Hasselblad extras like the X-Pan mode for those iconic panoramas. At nighttime, using the built-in night modes, neither phone is particularly amazing. Especially not when using the ultra-wide or zoom functions. They can struggle with motion blur in really low light scenes, even with the main camera. And I found that neither draws in as much light as Google's Pixel phones. The poorer ultra-wide with its cool greenish tint is clearly not as good on the 12R as it is on the 12, and again having extra zoom strength does mean for more detailed zoomed in shots. Now in the end, while it's clear the OnePlus 12 is the better phone, of course it is, it costs more. The OnePlus 12R to me is the outstanding value phone in this series. It gives you so much performance and capability for the amount that you pay for it. You get a top tier processor, you get a great display, you get great battery life and really fast charging. It's really not missing all that much from the OnePlus 12 beyond that zoom camera and the wireless charging. Nothing at least that makes a significant impact on how it feels to use and how it performs. And given that the 12 itself is already great value for money, the 12R is incredibly competitive. Let me know what you think of these two phones in the comments down below. Which one are you going for? Are you going to save money and get the 12R or splash out for the flagship? You can follow me on Threads if you want to. I'm at Cam Bunton, and if you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap the notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.